Gam Yu-eun anxiously checks her lottery numbers on her laptop. As soon as she realizes she's won first place, she falls back onto the bed in shock. Overwhelmed with excitement, she quickly messages Ji-woo to share the incredible news. She's finally leaving the company. The next day at work, Yu-eun surprises her colleagues by arriving in an unusually cheerful mood. Known for her constant frustration, her sudden happiness raises a few eyebrows. Nonetheless, she carries out her tasks as the perfect secretary to President Ch. Dohyeok. Dohyeok became the president of Irene, Korea's leading cosmetic brand, at a young age. Renowned for his sharp business acumen, he propelled the company's annual sales to new heights. Though he was undeniably handsome and intelligent, his good looks were deceiving. Beneath them, he was ruthless. As Yu-eun places a cup of coffee on his desk, she tells him she has something urgent to discuss. However, her irritation flares when he, as always, calls her Secretary Kong instead of her actual name. She had been Do-hyuk's secretary for a year now, enduring his infamous temperament and relentless demands. Working for him meant being on call at all hours, and she had long wanted to quit. One evening, Do-hyuk left the office without informing her, causing her to leave late. Frustrated and exhausted, she had planned to buy bunggyeobang, the fish-shaped pastry filled with sweet red bean paste, to lift her mood, but by the time she got there they were sold out. Out of sheer annoyance, she impulsively bought a lottery ticket instead, never expecting to win. Now, with her windfall in hand, Yu-eun is determined to leave behind her exhausting job, endless debt, and tyrannical boss. She hands in her resignation letter, only for Do-hyuk to reject it outright. Stunned, she watches as he casually pushes the letter back toward her and shifts the conversation elsewhere. Throughout the day, he continues to pile more tasks onto her as if nothing had happened. Confused and frustrated, Yu-eun has no choice but to comply. For now. Later that night, Yu-eun arrives home after another exhausting overtime shift. Tearfully, she wonders what the point of winning the lottery is if she's still trapped as Do-hyuk's overworked secretary. Staring at her bank account, the numbers confirming her 16 billion won balance, she contemplates what to do with it. Stocks, real estate, or starting a business? All seem like viable options. But then, a deeper question arises. Why did she even become a secretary in the first place? She had fallen into the job right after finishing her freshman year, when it was finally time to step into the workforce. But now, she decides, she will never be a secretary again. What she really wants is revenge. The next morning, Yu-eun sits at her desk, exhausted. She had spent all night crafting her revenge plan and finally settled on 3 ideas. As Do-hyuk approaches, she executes the first. Choi Do-hyuk, she calls out, deliberately mispronouncing his name. But he keeps walking, completely unfazed. Yu-eun expected this and immediately moves on to plan 2. She pours an excessive amount of salt into his coffee, serving it with barely concealed anticipation. Will he explode in anger? Will he finally snap? However, Do-hyuk takes a sip, his expression unchanging. He doesn't so much as blink. Yu-eun watches in disbelief and turns to leave, until she suddenly hears his chair scrape against the floor. Her heart stops as he stands and walks toward her. This is it, she thinks. I'm done for. She squeezes her eyes shut, bracing for his wrath. But instead, a gentle hand ruffles her hair. I'm sorry, Do-hyuk murmurs. Yu-eun's eyes snap open in shock, but before she can react, he turns swiftly back to his seat, gesturing for her to leave. Still stunned, she watches as he takes another sip of the coffee. This time, he freezes. Finally tasting the overwhelming salt, he mutters, Secretary Kang finally snapped. Later that evening, Do-hyuk finds himself at a bookstore, deep in thought. He wonders why Secretary Gam is acting so strangely. Is she sick? Until now, he had enjoyed teasing her by calling her Secretary Kang, a habit he never thought much about. She had always been a model secretary, never making mistakes. So why did she mess up the coffee? To him, mistakes equated to failure. But, unlike his past incompetent secretaries, Yu-eun was different. He wasn't about to let this slip. Determined to fix whatever was wrong, he buys an armful of books on management and workplace psychology. The next day, Yu-eun arrives at the office on time, still baffled by the president's unexpected reaction. Her previous plans had completely failed, but she remains undeterred. She moves on to her third strategy. This time, she deliberately messes up his usual sandwich order, replacing pickles with an overload of cucumbers, something she knows he dislikes. Yet, instead of getting annoyed, Dohyeok praises her for a job well done. To make matters worse, he even corrects her pronunciation of his name, proving that he was fully aware of what she had been trying to do. Before she can react, he calmly leaves the office, remarking, "Humans make mistakes." Then, without warning, he informs her that he'll be out all afternoon. Yu-eun's face lights up. "Shall I reschedule your meetings?" she asks eagerly. But he simply waves her off. No need. Shocked, Yu-eun stares after him as he walks away. Her hands tremble, and the tray she's holding slips from her grip, clattering onto the desk. What the hell is going on? Later that night, she vents to Ji-woo about Do-hook's bizarre behavior. Ji-woo listens thoughtfully before making a bold suggestion. Maybe he's trying to help you relieve stress. Yu-eun scoffs, but as she replays her interactions with him, something clicks. Had he actually noticed her suffering? His sudden politeness unsettles her more than his usual cruelty. She can't help but wonder, is this the real him? After messing up Do-hook's coffee and sandwich, Yu-eun remains determined to get her revenge. Ji-woo, noticing her frustration, asks what she plans to do next. Awkwardly, Yu-eun recounts her failed attempts. Ji-woo chuckles and suggests a different approach, finding Do-hook's weaknesses by discreetly following him. Yu-eun hesitates but ultimately agrees. The next day, while tidying up Do-hook's office, she stumbles upon a book titled How to Educate Disobedient Children. She freezes, flipping through a few pages in confusion. Does he have kids? The thought is absurd, yet the book is there in plain sight. Before she can think further, she's interrupted by the arrival of Director Lee. Dressed sharply and carrying a suitcase, Director Lee sets a small package on the desk. "I got this for you in France," he says with a charming smile, handing Yu-eun a gift. Noticing a loose button on her blouse, he casually helps her fasten it. Yu-eun stiffens. Lee Wai-ye, the scandalous third son of Hanang Group and one of Do-hook's closest friends, was notorious for his playboy ways. But before she can react, Do-hook strides into the office. His eyes immediately darken upon seeing Lee adjusting her blouse. "What are you doing here?" Do-hook asks coldly. Lee smirks. "I came to see my old friend, and, of course, Secretary Gam." The air between them grows tense. Sensing the rising hostility, Yu-eun quickly excuses herself to fetch coffee. As she walks out, Do-hook unexpectedly calls out, "Shahti," correctly pronouncing her name. Lee raises an eyebrow. "Oh? You're finally calling her by her real name now?" Do-hook ignores him. "Leave." Lee, unfazed, lets his gaze drift across the desk, until he spots the book. He picks it up with amusement. "Wait, this book? Don't tell me your monk friend is really raising a kid now." Do-hook sighs, rubbing his temples. "Secretary Gam has been acting strangely lately. She needs adjustment." Lee flips through the pages with interest. "I see. And here I thought you were finally trying to understand human emotions." Do-hook scowls. Lee only grins wider. "She's cute and charming. If you need help fixing her, I'd be more than happy to step in." The words barely leave his mouth before Do-hook's expression turns murderous. "Touch her and I'll break your face." Lee raises his hands in surrender, laughing. "Relax, man. I was joking." But then his gaze flickers back to the book. "Wait, are you actually following this thing's advice?" Do-hook snatches the book back with a glare. Get out. Lee shakes his head with a sigh. You're still such a robot. That evening, Ji-woo tries to console Yu-eun. You're giving up too quickly. Start with what's within your control. Yoon, still frustrated, tells Ji-woo about the strange book she saw. Ji-woo pauses, then bursts out laughing. So, he's actually married and suspiciously nice to his wife? Yu-eun bristles. I hate him. She had assumed Do-huk was some cold-hearted workaholic. But now, the idea that he might have a secret, loving family makes her feel resentful. Why should he get to have a perfect home life when she never did? Ji-woo interrupts her thoughts with a sudden suggestion. Be late tomorrow. What? You've never been late before, right? So do it, shake things up. Yu-eun protests at first, but after some persuasion, she gives in. That night, she does something she hasn't done in years. She relaxes. She watches TV, drinks beer, and eventually drifts off to sleep on the couch. Then she has a dream. In it, she's Do-huk's wife, smiling sweetly and acting lovey-dovey with him. Yu-eun jerks awake, utterly horrified. What kind of nightmare was that? Still dazed, she rubs her face, trying to shake off the dream's unsettling warmth. As she gets ready for the day, a thought lingers in the back of her mind. Why did her subconscious create such a ridiculous scenario? And, more importantly, why didn't it feel entirely unpleasant? Yu-eun had spent years ingraining discipline into her routine. Being late was never an option, but today she arrives late, stumbling on the way in and scraping her knee. By the time she reaches her desk, the morning meeting is already about to begin. A familiar voice comments, "You're late." Yu-eun freezes. The president. She whips around, startled, and quickly bows. "I'm sorry." Do-huk studies her for a moment before asking, "Did you oversleep?" She hesitates. "Something like that." His sharp gaze lingers on her. "Why did you sleep so late?" Without thinking, she blurts out, "Because you always make me work overtime." There's a brief silence. Then, to her surprise, he says, "I won't do that anymore." Before she can process his words, he frowns and looks down. "You're bleeding." Yu-eun follows his gaze and sees the small cut on her knee. Embarrassed, she hurriedly explains, "I just tripped." Do-huk extends his hand. "Come with me." She hesitates. Is this his new way of bullying her? But she has no choice but to follow. Inside his office, he takes out a first aid kit and begins disinfecting her wound, ignoring her weak protests. She yelps at the sting, and his brows furrow. "Did that hurt?" As she looks up at him, his handsome face dangerously close, her mind betrays her. Last night's dream flashes before her eyes. She quickly shakes it off. Earlier that morning, Do-huk had been deep in thought. Yu-eun's behavior had changed drastically over the past few days, and he was concerned. To address the issue, he turned to a book he had recently started reading. How to Educate Disobedient Children. It had surprisingly insightful advice. So far he had read. Chapter 1. Pay attention to the broken child. Observe the root cause of their behavior. Chapter 2. Attitude towards a broken child. Provide a comfortable atmosphere and offer praise. Following this guidance, he had been watching Yu-eun's erratic work hours and concluded that her excessive workload might be the reason for her breakdown. Today, as he flips to Chapter 3, Communicating with a Broken Child, the book advises ending conversations over a meal. With this in mind, he decides not to scold Yu-eun for being late. Instead, he asks why. When she admits it's because of overtime, Chapter 1's lesson clicks into place. This is my fault. He was about to invite her to dinner when he noticed the fresh wound on her knee. And now here he is, clutching her up. After finishing the bandage, he straightens up. Yu-eun, still processing the situation, mutters, "Thank you. Should I get you some coffee?" Do-hyuk pauses. Coffee? He had meant to invite her to dinner, but before he can say anything, she's already walking away. Meanwhile, his phone vibrates. A woman keeps messaging him, asking to meet. She waits for his response, but when none comes, she sighs. "I thought he would come," she murmurs. Her driver glances at her through the rearview mirror. Is something wrong? She shakes her head. No, nothing. Yu-eun finally pays off her debt, but instead of feeling relief, she feels lost. She recalls the job interview she had years ago. Which are financial goals? At the time, she had no answer. Now, she has more money than she ever imagined, 16 billion won, but she still doesn't know what to do with it. Ji-woo had told her she was lucky to live a good life, but Yu-eun doesn't see the world that way. If it were truly fair, her parents wouldn't have gone through what they did. She has been living alone for 10 years. The only family she has left is her aunt, who constantly pushes her to get married. Yu-eun doesn't understand it. Do people get married because they need a family? She doesn't feel the same way. To her, family is something you should be able to rely on, something safe. But instead of home, the only place she feels she can return to is the company. With that thought, she steps back into the office. After taking a half-day off, Yu-eun unexpectedly bumps into President Do-hyuk. "Are you free later?" he asks. She hesitates but replies, "Yes, it must be another night shift." But then, to her shock, he shyly adds, "We've never eaten together before." Yu-eun freezes. Did I hear that right? Moments later, they sit across from each other in the company cafeteria. Do-hyuk clears his throat. "I realize I haven't paid much attention to you before, but I want to change that." Yu-eun blinks, taken aback. He continues, "Lately you've been on my mind." His gaze lingers on her. "And I don't plan on letting you go." Her face heats up. "Was that a confession?" She immediately stands up. Do-hyuk frowns. "Where are you going?" "I need some water," she blurts out, avoiding his gaze. As she storms off, she can't shake the feeling that something is wrong with him. What's with this sudden change? Later, Yu-eun goes shopping with Ji-woo. She browses through expensive outfits, but can't stop thinking about yesterday's events. Even as Ji-woo shows her designer pieces, her mind keeps replaying Do-hyuk's words. Why did it feel like he was confessing? Eventually, she tries on an outfit, feeling shy. She has never spent so much money on herself before. But should she? She stares at the price tag, feeling dumbfounded. Taking a deep breath, she shakily hands her card to the cashier and pays in full. As she leaves the store, guilt creeps in. I can't believe I spent so much. But then she checks her bank balance. It's barely changed. Her mood instantly lifts. Still, she makes a promise to herself. No more reckless spending. The next day, Do-hyuk calls her to his office. Yu-eun sighs but reluctantly goes. As she enters, he begins discussing the weekly schedule, but then he pauses. His eyes widen. She tilts her head. "Sir?" "Leave," he suddenly orders. She forces a polite smile. "So he's going to tell me to change the schedule instead." "Understood," she says, and walks out. As soon as the door closes, Do-hyuk leans back and mutters under his breath. She looks beautiful. Later. Yu-eun shivers from the cold as she works at her desk. She drapes a blanket over herself and keeps typing. It's strange, she hasn't been forced to work overtime lately. Just then, Do-hyuk approaches. His gaze flicks to her blanket. Without a word, he disappears into his office, only to return moments later with his coat. "Put this on," he orders. Yu-eun hesitates but obeys. "You're always cold," he mutters. You'll catch a fever at this rate. I'm fine, she insists, but then she starts coughing. Do-hook sighs. I'll help you put it on. She shakes her head. I can do it myself. But the coat is far too big and she struggles to find the sleeves. Before she can protest, he steps in, adjusting it for her. His hands brush against hers. Go home early, he says firmly. That evening, Lee visits Do-hook's office. Where's Secretary Nam? Lee asks. I sent her home. She didn't look well, Do-hook replies. Lee raises an eyebrow. Oh, you sound concerned. He smirks. Does Secretary Gam have a boyfriend? Do-hook visibly tenses. Lee grins. Wait, are you jealous? Before Do-hook can react, Lee suddenly grabs his face, studying him. Right at that moment, Yu-eun walks in. She stops in her tracks. She had come to return Do-hook's coat. But now, seeing the two men in a bizarre position, she doesn't know what to do. He's not married, right? Just then her phone buzzes. A text from Do-hook. How are you feeling? Before she can reply, another message follows. Are you free next week for a drink? Yu-eun stares at her screen, stunned. The scene shifts to their first get-together. She sits across from him, feeling awkward. How did I end up here? After witnessing the awkward scene last week, Yu-eun finally decides to open up and have an honest conversation with Do-hook. How much can you drink? She asks, curious. To her surprise, he responds. I don't drink at all. I'm afraid I might get addicted. A sudden realization dawns on her, and she wonders, why did he bring me here if he doesn't drink? Do-hook then asks her about her drinking capacity. Yu-eun shrugs. I drink as much as anyone else. She takes a sip of the bitter alcohol. He looks at her with concern. Do you have any worries? Feeling a bit awkward but determined to speak her mind, she answers, I guess it's time to think about getting married. His immediate refusal to get married infuriates her. She's about to retort, but Do-hook quickly adds, just stay by my side like this. Yu-eun's cheeks redden at his words. Any concerns about your salary or treatment? He asks casually. Then it clicks in Yu-eun's mind. It's because of her lottery win that he insisted on this dinner. Forcing a smile, she answers, I don't have any specific concerns right now. Do-hook leans in and confesses, I heard you were thinking about resigning. Honestly, that's the only way I could think of to keep you close. He continues, You've been the best secretary I've had. I don't think I'll find someone as perfect as you again. Yu-eun is touched by his words, but she can't help thinking, if he keeps talking like this, I might end up staying here forever. After a night of excessive drinking and receiving praise, Yu-eun leaves the restaurant feeling light-headed. Do-hook offers to call a taxi, but Yu-eun stops him. I have a secret to tell you, she says, her voice low. Do-hook looks at her curiously but stands firm, refusing to let her distract him. Yu-eun, feeling bold, grabs him by the collar and pulls him closer. She whispers in his ear, I won 16 billion won in the lottery. Are you jealous? Her words catch him off guard, making him pause and think. She adds, frustrated, It might not be much to you, but for someone like me, it's enough to quit my job. She grabs him by the collar again. Do you even know my full name? Surprised, he calls her by her full name, something he's never done before. Yu-eun releases her grip in shock. Do-hook shyly apologizes, admitting he never called her by her name before. She lectures him sternly, saying, From now on, call me Yu-eun. He nods and agrees, deciding not to send her home alone. Where do you live? He asks, but she refuses to answer, her anger growing. Do-hook seems to think for a moment before suggesting, I'll take you to a hotel first. I don't want you to get hurt. Yu-eun snaps. I'll be fine. But he insists, eventually taking her to his home instead. The next day, Yu-eun wakes up to find herself in Do-hook's bed. What now? She wonders, pretending to still be asleep. Do-hook exits the shower and Yu-eun can't help but sneak a glance. She's astounded by his appearance, but quickly averts her eyes when he notices her watching. "Is your stomach okay now?" he asks, still concerned about her health. Yu-eun, caught off guard, reminds him, "You're not wearing clothes." Realizing his mistake, he quickly turns away and apologizes shyly. As he walks away to put on clothes, Yu-eun is left behind, feeling flustered. Why was I thinking that about him? She shakes off the thought. Just then, the front door opens. A woman enters, calling out for Dohyeok. She freezes upon seeing Yu-eun on his bed, both women equally surprised. Do-hook reappears and sees the two women standing there. Yu-eun awkwardly tries to explain, but the woman, Hyo-rin, interrupts. "I always thought you were gay or wanted to be a monk," she says with a laugh. Yu-eun is still processing when Hyo-rin wishes her the best and adds, "Have you told your father yet?" Her father? Yu-eun thinks. That's the chairman? Go young. Suddenly everything clicks. She recalls how Do-hook's maternal family took him in, and realization hits her like a ton of bricks. After completing his studies abroad, Do-hook's adoptive parents now run the family business. He excuses himself, saying he and Yu-eun have work to do. Yu-eun stands up to leave, apologizing for her actions the previous night. Once home, Yu-eun reflects on what it truly means to come from the Chae family, inheriting a successful business and being wealthy. She's worked alongside Do-hook for a while but never discussed their families. Now she realizes he comes from a completely different world. Lately, his actions have been making her feel strange. She wonders if her change in attitude is because of the lottery or because she's always overworked. She's been working for so long and yet she's unsure. Despite it all, she decides to resign, to stop being a secretary. Meanwhile, Do-hook's cousin, Hyo-rin, teases him about Yu-eun, and he explains that she's his secretary. Hyo-rin hands him an envelope, leaving him stunned. She sighs and comments that this man had started sending letters to their house when nothing else worked. How could someone like him be his father, she asks. Do-hook angrily crumples the paper without reading it. Hyo-rin admits she peeked through the letter and says it mentioned that he's coming back to Korea, which leaves Do-hook bewildered. Back in the office, Yu-eun starts thinking about her resignation letter. She hasn't fully figured out her future, but she knows one thing for sure: she wants to quit. The biggest reason is her boss, but she hesitates to admit it. Lately, seeing him change, she feels blank. She knows there can never be anything between them, as they come from different worlds. Yu-eun is determined to leave, but as she approaches Do-hook, she finds him in a bad mood. She can't bring herself to tell him face to face, so she plans to go straight to HR. She knows it's not a light decision, but she'll explain it later. As she sneaks away, Do-hook notices and asks, "Where are you going?" Unable to form a sentence, Yu-eun dashes away. Do-hook starts running after her, finally catching up and asking, "What happened?" He spots the resignation letter and asks if she's serious. Yu-eun apologizes, promising to teach the next secretary everything she knows. "Is it because of me?" Do-hook asks, looking genuinely concerned. "I'm sorry for my actions. Please, give me another chance." Yu-eun pauses. "Why do you keep calling me by my name? What is all this?" Do-hook hesitates before explaining, recalling the events of the previous night. Yu-eun becomes flustered, remembering everything, and quickly turns away, muttering that she doesn't understand what he's saying. She starts running down the stairs but accidentally trips. A flashback hits her. She remembers being in a car accident with her parents, everything turning dark. She opens her eyes to find herself on the floor, embraced by an unconscious Do-hook. It turns out he has a mild concussion and will need to wear a cast for a month. Yu-eun feels an overwhelming sense of guilt, wondering if this might land her in trouble. She begins to apologize, but Do-hook redirects the conversation to her resignation letter. He suggests she delay it for now. Before Yu-eun can respond, the chairman enters and immediately asks if Do-hook is okay. Do-hook reassures him, but the chairman presses, asking how the injury happened. Yu-eun tenses up, knowing this could be a disaster for her. However, Dohyeok lies, saying he tripped on the stairs and that Secretary Gam called an ambulance. The chairman, satisfied with the explanation, turns to Yu-eun and praises her for her quick actions. Yu-eun is touched by Do-hyuk's generosity, but her thoughts race. The chairman notices the resignation letter and asks what it is. Yu-eun, startled, quickly grabs the letter, explaining that she had brought the paperwork in such a hurry. She crumples the paper, deciding to delay her resignation for now. Later that night, Yu-eun helps Do-hyuk pack up his things to work from home. He admits, "It's thanks to you that I realized I've been lacking as a boss. I'm sorry if I've made you uncomfortable. I didn't want to lose a competent co-worker like you," he continues. Yu-eun sighs. "I wasn't competent," she quips. "I accidentally added salt to your coffee and put way too many cucumbers in your sandwich." She clarifies that she didn't hurt his arm on purpose. Do-hyuk smiles and confesses, "It feels good to see you feel guilty about me." "I can't let you leave now," he says, causing Yu-eun to blush profusely. She quickly turns away, and Do-hyuk wonders aloud, "We're such a fantastic match. A wicked boss and a wicked secretary." After completing the transfer of her new secretary 4 weeks ago, Yu-eun found it to be a tough adjustment. The deadly commute between her home and the company and the president's house was too much to handle. One day, Do-hyuk suggested they work together at his home. She wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but when they arrived, she realized his home wasn't really a home. As they ate awkwardly, Yu-eun wondered if she was the only one with dirty thoughts. She tried to make conversation by asking what he did on weekends. "I read books," he replied. Yu-eun tried to keep the conversation going by asking about the books he read in the office. She then pointed out that his children must be happy to have him. Surprised, Do-hyuk clarified, "I'm single. I don't have children." Yu-eun was secretly happy about this, but when she realized why she felt that way, her joy quickly faded. She tried to cover up her embarrassment by chuckling, saying her mother always warned her she'd be punished if she left leftovers on her plate. "I guess I have a long way to go before I'm fully grown up," she said, smiling. Do-hyuk smiled back. "Your mother sounds like a good person." Yu-eun agreed, but an awkward silence followed. She quickly tried to change the subject, suggesting they go for coffee at a nearby cafe, but Do-hyuk hesitated. "My mother isn't here," he said. "I don't like the coffee at that cafe. How about a stroll instead?" She agreed, wondering what had just happened between them. They walked in silence until Do-hyuk broke it, apologizing for the earlier conversation. "It's okay," she said, sipping her coffee. "I brought up the topic." As she tasted the coffee, she was amazed at how delicious it was. Do-hyuk then commented, "It's too bad we won't see each other after this. If I'd known this would happen, I would have been nicer to you." Yu-eun's eyes widened. She couldn't understand why he was saying this now. On Friday, Yu-eun and Do-hyuk were working overtime. She offered him coffee, and he agreed. As she stirred the coffee, tired, she hoped to forget about his earlier words. She knew there were only 2 weeks left before she resigned, and she found relief in that thought. Her moment of relief was interrupted when Do-hyuk approached her to apologize for making her work overtime. "It's fine," she said, just as her stomach growled, making her blush. "How about we get dinner?" Do-hyuk suggested. She agreed, saying she was fine with anything. "Anything except beans?" he asked, a playful grin on his face. Yu-eun laughed and agreed. He scrolled through his phone, searching for food options, and she watched him fondly. As she realized what she was doing, she became determined to quit her job. Later, the doorbell rang. Yu-eun offered to answer it, but when she opened the door, she found Lee standing outside. Do-hyuk had a sense of déjà vu. Lee, noticing the tension, remarked, "I'll leave if I'm interrupting," but Do-hyuk assured him it wasn't what he thought. Lee then looked at Yu-eun and lectured Do-hyuk for the way he treated others. "I came to drink and watch a movie with you," he said. Yu-eun couldn't help but recall what she had seen back at the office, and she began to wonder if their relationship wasn't as normal as it seemed. Jealous feelings crept in, but she quickly shook them off. After all, she was planning to quit soon. She packed her bag, reminding herself that it had been a brief yet enjoyable experience with the president. Pushing back her tears, she walked out of the room. In the hallway, she found Do-hook outside and told him she had an emergency. He reminded her that the food had arrived, but she forced a smile and asked him to eat with Lee. Confused, Do-hook watched as she walked out. Yu-eun tried to find a taxi, but she was interrupted when Do-hook ran toward her. "I'm sorry for not telling Lee in advance," he apologized. Yu-eun tried to explain, "It's not like that. Something really urgent came up." Lee approached them, waving Yu-eun's phone in the air. "You left this," he said. Yu-eun, looking at Do-hook, said, "I won't tell anyone at work, and I wish you both a happy relationship." Both Lee and Do-hook were shocked. After clearing up the misunderstanding, Lee couldn't help but have a hearty laugh while Yu-eun sat, completely mortified. She felt like she could disappear into the floor. Lee explained that the movie was his, and he had wanted Do-hook to watch it since he was a good critic. Do-hook apologized to Yu-eun, but she quickly said, "It's my fault, I'm sorry." Lee, watching them closely, smiled knowingly, sensing there was something more between them. Do-hook then asked if she had figured out the emergency she had mentioned, clearly eager to escape the embarrassing situation. He began to leave, but before he could get far, he offered to take her home. Yu-eun refused, insisting that she would walk. Do-hook watched her walk away, lost in thought, until Lee's voice snapped him back to reality. Lee teased him, asking, "So, have you started to like her?" Do-hook blushed and responded, "Is it that obvious?" Lee grinned. "I know you. It's not like honey in your eyes, more like a honeycomb falling through them." Lee then shifted the topic. "How'd you hurt your arm? You're not usually careless." Do-hook explained the situation, and Lee commented, "You're obsessed with her. You need to cross the line and confess." Do-hook shook his head. "I don't want to force my feelings on her." Meanwhile, Yu-eun met up with some colleagues, and they praised her for doing a great job. They joked about whether the president was really as strict as he appeared, wondering if he might be gentle beneath his serious expression. Just then, her phone rang. She excused herself to answer the call, only to hear silence on the other end. She apologized for the poor signal, but then she heard him cough. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "I'm fine," he replied. "Take it easy today and rest," she suggested. But Do-hook refused, saying, "I'm fine, really." However, Yu-eun insisted, "I'm getting you a fever reducer, wait for me." Do-hook hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "I'm sorry for bothering you." The call ended, and Yu-eun sighed, feeling both touched and confused by his response. Meanwhile, Do-hook blushed, realizing that everything had gone just as Lee had predicted. As Yu-eun took a taxi to his house, she couldn't help but reflect on the fact that her last day of work was only a few days away. Yu-eun had always known her boss was out of order. He was already a workaholic, but lately he had even taken on her tasks. As she entered his house, she was surprised to find it eerily quiet. She wandered through, searching for him, until she found him collapsed on the couch, burning with fever. Before she could call 911, Do-hook weakly called for her. She rushed to his side, telling him she had brought medicine but wasn't sure it would be enough. As she reached for him, he suddenly grabbed her hand, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay!" Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to stay composed. "What if you get worse?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I won't get worse," he reassured her softly. "Just stay." Yu-eun nodded, her heart still racing, and he slowly released her hand. As she sat beside him, she couldn't hold back any longer. "I worked so hard, without expecting anything in return," she confessed. "I didn't hope for compliments or recognition. I just needed to pay the bills. I assumed you'd just dump me like the others." She looked at him, her voice fragile. "Is it my competence that you like? Would you even have noticed me if I hadn't worked so hard?" She knew she shouldn't say these things to a sick person, but the words spilled out uncontrollably. Her eyes widened as Do-hook quietly replied, You're wrong. He reached for her hand again, his voice soft but clear. I like you better when you're not working. Later, Yu-eun found herself staring blankly at the ceiling, lost in thought. Her friend Ju was complaining about her upcoming blind date, then paused, noticing that something was clearly wrong with Yu-eun. What's going on with you? Did your boss give you crap again? She asked, genuinely concerned. Yu-eun, fighting back tears, nodded. I'm screwed. Ju's eyes widened. Scammed? Was it about the lottery? Yu-eun blushed, her heart heavy. No, she whispered. I like Dohyeok. Ju froze, shocked to her core. What? She exclaimed. Yu-eun explained everything to Ju, pouring out her confusion, her fears, and her growing feelings for her boss. Ju's expression shifted from disbelief to anger. Are you serious? After all the complaints you had about him? Yu-eun nodded, her voice small. I tried to stop, but nothing worked. Ju sighed, exasperated. Look, I'm not the best person for dating advice, but I don't want you to end up as the heroine of a bad K-drama. Yu-eun laughed weakly, knowing her friend was right. She explained further. At first I thought he was just trying to screw me over, but after I said I would quit, he started reaching out to me outside of work. Talking to him, it made me realize he might be a better person than I thought. Ju raised an eyebrow. So, why was he working you to death before? Yu-eun hesitated before answering. For him, it was just a warm-up. She sighed. And I admit it, he's also really good-looking. Ju let out a long, dramatic sigh. Oh, so now you're a smitten kitten. Yu-eun blushed but nodded. I guess I am. Ju paused, her concern clear. I respect your decision, but the difference in your worlds, Yu-eun. You know it's not just about you two. There's a lot more standing in the way. Yu-eun's heart sank as she realized the truth in her friend's words. She wasn't some innocent girl dreaming of becoming a fairy tale princess. I don't want to be trampled on, she murmured. I've suffered and worked so hard. Why couldn't he have just had a slightly less impressive background? Then maybe I could have liked him freely. Yu-eun assured Ju that she would live stress-free and promised not to pursue her feelings for Dohyeok. Though Ju was sad for her, she couldn't help but offer an alternative, a blind date. At first, Yu-eun protested, but Ju persisted, saying it could be a change of scenery. And besides, the man was young and rich. Yu-eun didn't see the point of going on a blind date a week before leaving Irene. She hadn't made many friends in college, too focused on her grades to socialize, and at the office she only interacted with people when it was work. This would be the first time she'd meet someone in this context. She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. The blind date arrived, and as Yu-eun turned to greet him, she froze. Behind him stood Do-hyuk with his colleagues, and their eyes met. She felt like she'd been caught cheating. Do-hyuk, too, noticed her, but quickly turned away. Yu-eun's date apologized for being late, but she smiled and told him it was fine. He seemed like a clean-cut, polite man, someone her mother would likely approve of. He asked where she worked, and she replied, I'm a secretary at Irene. He remarked that it must be challenging dealing with executives all the time, and he found it impressive. She agreed that it was exhausting, but that she was used to it by now. She briefly mentioned her resignation, and the man asked if she was moving to another company. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm not switching companies. He then asked if she was changing careers, but she quickly replied that she wasn't. His questions persisted, and finally she admitted, I'm just quitting. The man paused for a moment before commenting, I'm happy for you, but honestly, I'd feel bad if I were you. At your age, you should be building your career. Women who leave at this stage often never return, and it can feel like they're lost. Yu-eun clenched her fists, her heart racing. I'm 28, she said firmly. Even if I waste several years from now, I'll still have many ahead of me. Please don't worry about me. The man, visibly intimidated by her response, excused himself soon after, leaving her feeling both relieved and frustrated. Yu-eun went to the restroom, sure that she had ruined the evening. Her mind swirled with doubts. What he said had stung. She might have agreed with him a few years ago, but now it felt suffocating. She remembered her mother's advice. People who race toward the finish line their whole lives may be the loneliest because they don't see anything around them. Her mother had wanted her to do what made her happy. And even Do-hook had told her he liked her better when she wasn't working. Shaking her thoughts aside, she reminded herself that it was just her first date. When she walked out, she was stopped by Do-hook, who asked, "Are you crying?" She blinked, startled. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged. "I was waiting for you to talk." They went to a nearby cafe by the Han River, sharing a beer in silence. Eventually, Do-hook broke the quiet, trying to say something, but his words faltered. Sensing what he wanted to ask, Yu-eun beat him to it. "It was a blind date, didn't work out," she said with a sad smile. "I must not be ready to meet someone." Do-hook nodded, then asked, "There's only a week left. What do you plan to do once you stop working?" Her mind flashed back to the man's words, and she hesitated. Finally, she blurted out, "I don't have anything in particular planned." Yu-eun questioned whether she was hopeless for taking a break while everyone around her was building their careers. She confessed that she didn't know what to do next. Do-hook reassured her, saying that whatever she decided to do, she would succeed because she had worked hard for him. Yu-eun burst into laughter, admitting that it had been very hard work and that she had considered quitting several times a day. But there were benefits too. She had been through a lot before joining Eileen, losing loved ones and not being ready to face the world alone. She told him that she no longer hated him. Do-hook, in turn, confessed that he knew he was hard on people but felt powerless to change it. Things that had been easy to undo in his childhood became more difficult as he grew older, and by the time he realized it, so much had passed him by, beyond his control. Just like her resignation. He expressed his gratitude for her, acknowledging that she had made him reflect on his mistakes and repent. He told her that it took courage to start something new, and in that sense she would do well wherever she went. Yu-eun turned her head away at the compliment, but Do-hook quickly realized the implication and asked her to stay in touch, suggesting they remain friends. Yu-eun's eyes widened. At 28, people were supposed to flourish, but she was still swimming against the current, impatient for success. Today, however, she just wanted to be swept away for once. The next day, Yu-eun confided in Ju about getting drunk and crossing the line with her boss. Ju calmly gestured for her to come closer. Yu-eun, stiff with embarrassment, complied. Without warning, Ju slapped her, asking, "What's wrong with you? It's always the quiet ones who cause trouble." As people started to watch the scene unfold, Ju continued, asking how far things had gone and if it was something Yu-eun could just brush off. Yu-eun shyly admitted, "We just kissed." Ju, visibly relieved, said, "It's not a big deal, except for his background." She apologized but assured Yu-eun it wasn't as serious as it seemed. Ju advised her to just apologize, claiming she was drunk. Yu-eun agreed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Do-hook must remember what happened. Despite her intentions, Yu-eun struggled to find the right moment to apologize. Meanwhile, Do-hook had been acting indifferent, and it seemed he was avoiding her. A colleague soon informed her that the next workshop would be held on Jeju Island, which excited Yu-eun. She found herself on the island just a few days before her resignation. However, she still hadn't found a way to address the situation with Do-hook, and he seemed to be keeping his distance. Meanwhile, Hin and Lee followed Do-hook to the island, remarking how they had never seen him so happy. Do-hook, lost in thoughts of that night, was interrupted by Lee, who asked him about it. Do-hook hesitated, but began to explain when a worker dragged Lee outside. Do-hook sighed, wondering what was wrong with him lately. He hadn't had a chance to speak to Yu-eun, and he longed to ask if she felt the same way he did, but he couldn't bring himself to. Despite his helplessness, he hoped Yu-eun would reach the same conclusion as he had that night. Later, Yu-eun drank with her colleagues, and after having a little too much, she excused herself to go to the convenience store for hangover medicine. As she walked, she couldn't help but wonder why the workshop location had changed from where it was originally supposed to be. She overheard some HR colleagues gossiping, calling the workshop a farewell party for the boss's secretary. They criticized the CEO for being clueless and labeled her as a gold-digging secretary. Yu-eun rushed away, tears welling up in her eyes. She knew she and Do-hook were from different worlds, but how did that make her a gold digger? She stumbled in her distress, but was suddenly caught by Do-hook. Seeing him, Yu-eun trembled. He asked, "Is something wrong?" Yu-eun hesitated, then asked about the workshop's goals. He confirmed that it was a surprise, and she asked him not to make a scene for her, as it would create a bad impression in front of their colleagues. Do-hook apologized, but Yu-eun reassured him. "It's not like I'm going to disappear after leaving the company." Yu-eun, caught up in the moment, blurts out that Do-hook can take care of her anytime he wants. Realizing what she just said causes both of them to blush deeply. Suddenly, they hear voices approaching, and they quickly decide to find somewhere more private. Once alone, Yu-eun apologizes for what happened that day, her voice hesitant. Do-hook stands speechless for a moment before apologizing too, admitting he's just as guilty as she is. Yu-eun, trying to make sense of the past night, recalls that she blacked out after the kiss. As the memories come rushing back, her face flushes uncontrollably. She asks, her voice tentative, if he's okay with their situation given his wealthy background. Do-hook pauses, then replies with a serious tone. "There's something I need to tell you, something that might ease your worries," he says. He reveals that he was adopted, and while many know he studied in the States and returned to Korea after his mother passed, the truth is that his father locked him up at home, seeing him as a nuisance. His mother had always been there for him, but she passed away in the States. His father, Moolin Kim, didn't like the idea of not having financial support, and, unlike him, his uncle didn't want to hand over his position. The position would only be passed on if his uncle found a good successor. So, Do-hook wouldn't automatically inherit it, even though his uncle cared about him. Yu-eun bursts into laughter, clearly not bothered by his past. "It doesn't change anything," she says. "There are plenty of people better than me out there, but why did you choose me?" Do-hook looks at her seriously and confesses, "When I first saw you, I felt like we were alike. My methods of keeping you close turned into affection. I wanted to see you smile, no matter where you were, even if it wasn't at Irene." Yu-eun then opens up, telling him about her past. She shares how she won the lottery, the pain of losing her parents, and how she tends to get rude and eat a lot when she drinks. He gently reminds her that she's already told him about the lottery. Surprised, Yu-eun mumbles a confession. "I like you too. You're good-looking and nice to me." Do-hook smiles, then says, "I have a lot more I want to ask you, but for now, all I really want is to kiss you." The scene then shifts to Do-hook's new secretary, Jian Lee, who is working peacefully. She had heard people call him a robot, describing his workload and communication as inhuman, but she finds it hard to believe as her current boss seems genuinely kind and gentle. Rumor has it that his secretary is the one who's changed him. Meanwhile, Yu-eun creates a weekly schedule for herself. Do-hook arrives, asking if he kept her waiting. She smiles, asking if he didn't have a meeting, and he reminds her that they're not going to talk about work. She apologizes and shows him her schedule. He comments, "That's so you." Then, she remarks on how he has his hair down today. "Do you not like it?" he asks, his voice teasing. Yu-eun blushes and quickly clarifies, "I love it." He shyly confesses that she seems different when he wears his hair down, making her fluster. She hesitates, then blurts out, "It makes me imagine you naked." He teases her, but their playful moment is interrupted when Yu-eun's stomach grumbles loudly. They both laugh, and she admits she's hungry. As they decide to go eat, Yu-eun quietly confesses, "I'm not a nice person and you should know that. You shouldn't leave me. After feeling disappointed, Do-hook smiles, saying he won't leave her. As they walk out together, a mysterious man watches them from a distance. Later, Do-hook drops her off at her home but doesn't let her leave, saying it's sad to see her go, her cute expression tugging at his heart. Yu-eun's heart flutters wildly, and without thinking, she hugs him, surprising him. She mumbles, "Can we stay like this for just a minute? It feels like I'm dreaming." Do-hook smiles fondly, agreeing, "I can't believe you're in my arms right now." But when he addresses her formally, she frowns, asking, "Do you want me to keep calling you boss?" He quickly apologizes, realizing his slip-up. Yu-eun, feeling the warmth of the moment, confesses, "I don't want to let go of you either. I wish you could come inside if you're not too busy." He admits that when she was at Irene, he was too busy, but now he isn't. She invites him in, telling him her place is a little messy, though in reality she'd already cleaned up. She's sure this is his first time in a studio apartment. She adds that the space is small, but Do-hook makes himself at home, sitting on the floor instead of a chair. As he looks around, he notices pictures on the walls. Staring at them, he reflects on how different yet similar their lives have been. He turns to her and asks, "Can you invite me over more often? I want to know everything about you, starting today." Just as she's about to respond, the doorbell rings, and they hear Ju's voice outside. Yu-eun panics, realizing she hasn't told Ju about her relationship with Do-hook. She quickly hides him in the bathroom and opens the door. Ju excuses herself to use the bathroom, but before Yu-eun can stop her, Ju bumps into something hard. She looks up to find Do-hook standing there. Yu-eun stammers, trying to explain, but Ju brushes her off, saying they can talk later. She turns to Do-hook and starts grilling him with questions. He apologizes for his behavior towards Yu-eun, and then, with a serious tone, asks for Ju's permission to date her friend. Ju continues her interrogation, asking about his health, his past relationships, and more. Do-hook answers each question honestly, eventually passing her test. Meanwhile, Hin accidentally mentions to his father that Do-hook is dating Yu-eun. Hearing Yu-eun's name causes her father to flinch in surprise. It turns out that Do-hook's family was involved in the accident that killed Yu-eun's parents, and this revelation makes it clear that they can't be together. In the car, Yu-eun shifts uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Do-hook notices and asks what's wrong. She reminds him that since the accident she gets nervous when riding in cars. He suggests they look for another vehicle, but she reassures him, saying she's fine now. Yu-eun then opens up, sharing her struggles after losing her parents. Do-hook listens intently, apologizing for not realizing sooner how much pain she was in. She tears up, but quickly shifts the mood, saying, "Let's get something salty to eat." After all the tears, Do-hook smiles, admiring Yu-eun's strength. Their relationship grew stronger day by day. One morning, Do-hook made a delicious breakfast for Yu-eun. She asked, "Do you eat like this when your helper isn't around?" He confessed, "No, I don't." Yu-eun noticed the exhaustion in his eyes and understood. It reminded her of the days when she didn't enjoy eating sealed bags or microwave dinners. They reminded her of how alone she was. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't cook like her mother. Over time, she learned to accept her reality. She was pulled out of her thoughts as Do-hook complimented her work ethic, making her realize what he meant when he said they were alike. She thanked him for the meal and promised, "Next time I'll cook for you." She hugged him from behind, wondering, what would have happened if we had met sooner? He smiled. "I'm sure there's an album at home. Maybe you can ask Hin about it." This made her happy. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Do-hook's eyes widened as he realized who it was. It was his father. The man outside smirked, asking, "What's taking you so long to answer?" Do-hook had known all his life that his father wasn't a good parent, but now, after all these years, his father was standing outside his door. He turned to Yu-eun, saying, "I'll be back in a second, I'm sorry." Yu-eun grabbed his hand and asked, "Is he the one who gave you a hard time?" Do-hook nodded. She reassured him. "I'll be here for you." Now they were seated with Moolin. Yu-eun felt uncertain about her choice to stay, but knew she couldn't leave Dohyeok alone. Dohyeok asked his father, "Why are you in Korea?" Moolin replied coldly, "You never answered my letter." He then noticed Yu-eun and complimented her, calling her his beautiful girlfriend. He extended his hand to her, but Dohyeok angrily shoved it away, demanding, "Get to the point." Moolin, with a disdainful sneer, called his son trash and warned Yu-eun not to ruin her life. In a surprising turn, Yu-eun threw her glass of water at him, firmly warning Moolin, "Watch your language." She stood tall, saying, "If you want to be treated like a father, act like one." This only enraged Moolin, and he cursed at her. Do-hook, visibly upset, stood up to defend her, threatening his father. Moolin sighed and stood up to leave, saying, "I only came to meet you. My uncle owes me for taking you away." He slammed the door on his way out, calling Do-hook rude and insolent. Do-hook apologized to Yu-eun for involving her, but she reassured him, "I offered to be here for you." He confessed that for the first time he felt big in front of his father, all thanks to her. Yu-eun became sentimental and embraced him, holding him close. Meanwhile, Do-hook's uncle met with Moolin, who casually mentioned meeting his son and his pretty girlfriend. This enraged Do-hook's uncle, who snapped, "How dare you talk about Yu-eun when you're the one who killed her family?" Moolin, unfazed, laughed mockingly. "The daughter of the person who drove that crap car," he sneered. He then demanded money before leaving a bitter tension in the air. Do-hook's uncle decides to meet with Yu-eun for his nephew's sake. Yu-eun agrees to the meeting and dresses up nicely. During their meal, he asks if she's seeing Do-hook. She confesses, "I really like him." Do-hook's uncle reflects on how everything went downhill when his sister chose Moolin as her partner. He had always known Moolin wasn't trustworthy, but didn't want to hurt his sister's feelings. In the end, he lost her. Out of guilt, he promised to do everything he could for Do-hook. He then reveals to Yu-eun that Do-hook's father was responsible for killing her parents and that he had covered it up for Do-hook's sake. He also admits that he hired her for Irene. Tears fill Yu-eun's eyes as she struggles to process his words. She asks, "Why did you do this? I thought I was doing well on my own." She vows to report everything to the police. The chairman agrees, but pleads with her not to tell Do-hook. He knows nothing and doesn't want to see him suffer. Overwhelmed by the weight of her emotions, Yu-eun lies in bed, consumed by memories of her independent journey. When Do-hook calls, she knows she can't tell him everything. She fears that revealing the truth will leave him with no one to turn to. When he arrives, she embraces him tightly, simply needing to be close to him. From that point on, Yu-eun begins spending less time with Do-hook, claiming to be busy with preparations for her cafe. She continues to act normally around him for the time being, but deep down, she isn't sure how long she can keep this up. Do-hook senses something is off. He feels like she's avoiding him. When he goes to her apartment, he discovers that she's moved out. Determined, he searches for her frantically, with Lee's help. Lee reassures him, "I'll help you find her." Meanwhile, Hein inquires about Do-hook from Lee and is told that Do-hook is lost in his thoughts, staring off into space like he used to in high school. Lee is frustrated. "I can't believe Yu-eun is doing this to him." Hein admits that it's her fault for telling her father about their relationship. On the other hand, Do-hook returns home and realizes it's finally Saturday. Weekends never mattered much to him until he met Yu-eun. Now he counts the mundane passing of days, desperately searching for her. He remembers Yu-eun mentioning she wanted to open a cafe, so he starts visiting every cafe he can find, but none of them are hers. At this point, even coffee makes him nauseous. One day, while sitting in his car, he spots someone with similar hair and wonders if it's Yu-eun. Meanwhile, Yu-eun has started working at Ju's mother's cafe and has been staying with Ju's family. As she wipes down tables, she wonders if Dohyeok is worried about her. If things had been different, maybe they could have had a real conversation. She is interrupted when a familiar voice calls out, "I found you." It's Director Lee. He asks, "Why are you doing this to Dohyeok? He's not eating, not sleeping, working like a robot." He tells her, "Couldn't you have ended things more maturely?" Ju instantly defends Yu-eun and pushes Lee out of the cafe. Lee, confused, asks, "Who are you?" Ju replies firmly, "I'm her mother." Without another word, she kicks him out. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk chases after a brown-haired woman, but quickly realizes it isn't Yu-eun. He gets a message from Lee, who tells him he has found her and includes the location of her cafe. At the cafe, Ju confronts Do-hyuk, clearly angry. Yu-eun, finishing up, locks the door to the cafe, but just as she's about to leave, an unexpected guest appears. They sit together on a nearby bench to talk. Yu-eun apologizes for ghosting him, and Do-hyuk, genuinely remorseful, asks if it was his fault. He promises to do better. Yu-eun reassures him that he did nothing wrong, but she hesitates before telling him why she left. She wonders if he'll believe her if she tells the truth. Finally, in fear, she lies, telling him she no longer feels the same way and suggests they break up. Do-hyuk gently asks her to look him in the eyes as she says this, and as tears fall from her eyes, he tenderly wipes them away before kissing her. The next day, Do-hyuk reflects on Yu-eun's strange behavior, wondering why she's acting this way when she always has her reasons. He calls his uncle for answers, asking what happened during their meeting. His uncle advises him to consult someone closer to his caliber, which catches him off guard. Later, Do-hyuk visits his uncle's home, but ends up facing his father instead. Moolin inquires about his girlfriend, infuriating Do-hyuk. He threatens his father, but Moolin laughs, asking if Do-hyuk really doesn't know anything. Then, with chilling calmness, Moolin reveals that he was responsible for killing Yu-eun's parents. He taunts Do-hyuk, saying that despite his facade of normalcy, Do-hyuk grew up with someone like him as a father. Enraged, Do-hyuk smacks him, but his father continues to mock him. In that moment, Do-hyuk realizes how blind he had been. He finally understands Yu-eun's pain and wishes they had never met. He even wishes he had been the one to kill the man who brought him into this world, believing that would have spared Yu-eun the grief. Determined, Do-hyuk decides to meet with Yu-eun. He tearfully apologizes for being the son of someone like Moolin. Yu-eun, though in pain herself, consoles him, telling him it's not his fault. Later, Do-hyuk meets with his uncle, taking responsibility for how everything went downhill, and decides he must leave with his father. Hye-in overhears and rushes to tell Yu-eun, who, resolute, immediately heads to his house with Ju. She promises to stay by his side, despite the uncertainties of her own future. As she meets with his uncle, Yu-eun begins to untangle her feelings and decides to seek therapy for the strength to move forward. She demands Moolin's apology. A few months later, she confronts him, showing him the dashcam footage from the car crash as evidence of his crime. Moolin, unable to deny it, feigns innocence, claiming he was drunk and didn't do it on purpose. However, he is no longer able to escape the truth, and they order him to be taken away. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk's uncle steps down from management. Yu-eun wonders if this is truly the end, but Do-hyuk praises her for her strength and determination. He promises to stay by her side, and together they vow to build a future full of happiness. Meanwhile, Irene's reputation hangs in the balance, and its shareholders suggest demanding a public apology from the victim. However, Do-hyuk firmly refuses, stating that it's up to Yu-eun to decide if they deserve forgiveness. Soon, word spreads that people are boycotting Irene, along with strange rumors circulating about Yu-eun. She decides it's time to put an end to the gossip and arranges a press conference. That day, both Yu-eun and Do-hyuk address the public, sharing their story. The crowd reacts with mixed emotions. Some support them, while others accuse them of fabricating the entire situation. As spring arrives, Do-hyuk nervously tells Yu-eun he has a surprise for her. He takes her to a construction site and reveals that it's his property, offering her the freedom to use it however she wants. However, he adds one condition: she has to stay by his side forever. With a look of disbelief, he then asks her to marry him. Yu-eun, stunned, initially refuses, leaving Do-hyuk in shock, but then she chuckles and says that she will, indeed, marry him. He smiles, placing the ring on her finger, and they share a tender kiss. Excited, they show the ring to Ju and then meet with Yu-eun's parents. She tells them how she fell for Do-hyuk, and they, in turn, share their wisdom, reminding her that everyone has their rough patches. Over time, Yu-eun realizes that she and Do-hyuk are alike in that regard, both bruised and broken. Overcome with emotion, she begins to cry, and Do-hyuk embraces her, promising to make her the happiest woman alive. The scene shifts to their pre-wedding shoot in Jeju, with Lee and Ju bickering in the background, as usual. Later that night, Do-hyuk confesses to Yu-eun that he realized his love for her during their workshop trip. Blushing, she kisses him and tells him he has beautiful eyes. Returning to their hotel, they find Ju and Lee making out. They tease them before tending to a very drunk Lee. That night, Do-hyuk and Yu-eun fall asleep happily, wrapped in each other's arms. But on the morning of their wedding, Yu-eun starts having second thoughts. Meanwhile, Do-hyuk overhears someone shaming him for exposing his father and putting him behind bars. Lee quickly steps in to defend him, telling the man to take his gossip elsewhere. Hin then drops a bombshell, telling Do-hyuk that his bride is running away, which stuns him. He rushes to her, insisting that they should run away together. Yu-eun bursts into laughter, saying she isn't going anywhere and that she's not leaving her adorable husband behind. The wedding ceremony begins, and the couple recalls the journey that led them to this moment. Do-hyuk promises to always be there for Yu-eun, and she reflects on how, once upon a time, she wanted to run away from her problems. She never imagined she would end up marrying this man, the boss she once hated so much. Life, it seems, works in mysterious ways. As they walk up the aisle, Yu-eun apologizes for breaking his arm, to which Do-hyuk responds, "It was a pleasure to have my arm broken by Secretary Gam." When they're finally pronounced husband and wife, Yu-eun sighs in relief, grateful that she didn't trip at the end. Do-hyuk smiles, reassuring her that he would have caught her if it happened. With him by her side, she feels she could overcome anything, no matter how many times she falls or makes mistakes. And that's why they married that day. From then on, everything fell into place for Yu-eun. She had a loving husband and a flourishing cafe. But something was still missing. She looks up cute couple nicknames and gets caught by Ju-hoo. Ju asks her to just ask Do-hyuk directly, but Yu-eun protests, saying it's embarrassing. Instead, she asks Lee for advice, who reassures her, saying that simply calling her by her name is a big step forward. He reminisces about how long it took Do-hyuk to call him by his name, realizing that's just how he is. Ju watches Lee with fondness, thinking he looks better when he keeps his mouth shut. Seeing them bicker again, Yu-eun points out that Lee is definitely her type, which causes Ju to quickly shut her up. Later that night, Do-hyuk comes home late and apologizes, promising not to do so again. He mentions to his colleagues that his bunny-like spouse is waiting for him. Hearing the word spouse leaves Yu-eun dumbfounded. She immediately pulls up a slideshow of the couple's potential nicknames and explains the situation to him. They finally agree to call each other baby and Mei-yun. The scene shifts to Do-hyuk, who notices something seems off with Yu-eun. He catches her looking at something strange, and when he shows the drawing to his secretary, she recognizes it as a baby cushion. A sudden realization hits him. Yu-eun must be thinking about having children. When he returns home, Yu-eun notices his distant attitude and asks if something is wrong. Do-hyuk opens up, expressing his fear of not being a good father and that he might end up being like Mulin, afraid his child will suffer the same fate. Yu-eun reassures him, telling him he would be a wonderful father and that he's nothing like Mulin. Her words lighten his mood, and he is grateful to have her by his side, feeling like all his deep-rooted fears and wounds have started to heal. He then asks if they should try having a child. Yu-eun is shocked, but Do-hook, undeterred, starts removing his shirt, teasing her that they need to work hard day and night starting today. She blushes and argues that he's just scared. He smiles, playfully telling her to hold up her end of the bargain. From that day on, Do-hook works tirelessly, and Yu-eun starts to regret even bringing it up. Meanwhile, someone else is putting in effort as well. Director Lee is about to release a new film and seeks the advice of a fortune teller. The fortune teller warns him that the success will depend on the effort he puts in, though she notes that he seems the type to do things halfway. Frustrated, Lee regrets not asking Do-hook for advice instead. As the fortune teller continues, she reveals that there's a woman in Lee's life who is a few years younger than him. She describes Ji-woo, but Lee still doesn't realize who she's talking about. Meanwhile, Ju has become a content sales rep at Q Entertainment. Back in school, she once dreamed of becoming a TV show writer, but she was always her own harshest critic. Eventually, she decided to quit that path. After working for various companies, she somehow ended up here, at one of the top firms in the media industry. It's been 2 weeks since she started, and so far things have been peaceful. One day, a colleague brings her to a meeting, informing her that one of the directors will also be attending. He describes him as young but full of ambition. However, when she enters the meeting room, she comes face to face with Lee. An awkward silence fills the room, and they both gesture, each silently asking the other what they're doing here. Later, they end up having drinks, and Ju excuses herself for some fresh air, motioning for Lee to follow her. She teases him, saying that being a director isn't an easy job, especially for someone who had such a sheltered childhood. A flashback hits Lee, remembering how people used to bully him for becoming a director. Ju surprises him by confessing that she's actually impressed by his perseverance, especially since she gave up on her own dream. She starts heading back inside, but Lee stops her and asks why she dragged him out there. She simply replies that she wanted to chat with him, leaving him confused. Soon, everyone else leaves and Ju and Lee are left behind. They continue drinking, and the next morning Lee wakes up to find himself in Ju's room. He awkwardly tells her that things happened between them. Faint memories of the night flood Lee's mind, leaving him flustered. The scene shifts to Do-hook, who arrives at his office with his baby. His colleagues have all heard the rumors about Secretary Gam, but they're aware that the president prefers not to discuss his private life. As a result, the gossip quickly dies down, leaving no more rumors to entertain. The new secretary enters the office and sees Do-hook playing with his son. She offers to take care of the baby while he attends a meeting, but he refuses and brings his son with him. As the meeting progresses, Do-hook proudly looks at his son, amazed that he isn't crying, even in an unfamiliar environment. He wonders aloud where the little one got his good looks. Just as he says this, his son starts to cry. Do-hook excuses himself from the meeting, saying he needs to change his son's diaper and feed him some formula. Later that night, Do-hook puts Seiyu to sleep with a sigh of relief. His mood instantly lifts when he hears Yu-eun arriving. He immediately embraces her, confessing that he missed her. She smiles and asks if the babysitter will return tomorrow. He assures her that she will. She thanks him for taking care of Seiyu and asks if they should have dinner. He leans toward her, teasing that he'd rather have an incentive boss lady in bed. She chuckles, agreeing, and embraces him. With that, the two lovebirds wrap up another long, tiring day. The scene switches to Ji-woo and Lee, who are discussing their relationship. Ji teases Lee and he playfully responds, sparking their usual banter. Yu-eun watches them from a distance, fondly aware that Ji-woo clearly likes him. It's amusing to everyone at the cafe to see whether these two will get together. Yu-eun stretches, realizing she has something to tell Do-hook, something she's sure he'll be excited about. Just then, her phone rings. It's the babysitter, and the news she delivers makes Yu-eun shudder. She rushes to the hospital, where it turns out that Seiyu has pneumonia. Though it's not serious, the doctor warns that if he develops a high fever again, it could affect his brain. They recommend keeping him in the hospital for observation. Do-hook suggests Yu-eun go home and rest, but she protests, insisting she wants to stay by Seiyu's side. He insists, asking her not to worry as she hasn't been feeling well lately. She reluctantly agrees. That night, Do-hook sits by his son's bedside, holding his tiny hand with a sad expression. He finally understands what it means to have his heart torn away. Since Seiu's birth, he's learned so much, particularly that parents can give unconditional love to their children. He never fully realized the depth of sacrifice and love possible until now. He can't speak for the man who was supposedly his father, but now that he's experiencing it himself, he feels strangely relieved. He apologizes to Seiu, dreaming of the day his son will play with his mother. In the dream, his mother comments that Seiu is just as cute as he was at that age, and expresses pride in how well he's turned out. She apologizes for leaving too soon, and Do-hook breaks down in tears, telling her he did his best. His mother smiles, hugs him one last time, and wishes for him to be happy with his family. Do-hook jolts awake at the sound of Seiu's whimper. Yu-eun rushes to his side, making him promise not to get sick again. She then remembers she has something to tell him, and gestures for him to follow her to a private space so Seiu won't overhear. In a quiet moment, she reveals that they're expecting a second baby, whom she's nicknamed Goldie, since Seiu was Dodo when he was younger. Before Do-hook can fully express his joy, Seiu approaches them, curious about what Goldie means. Yu-eun gestures for Do-hook to stay quiet and quickly changes the subject. The scene shifts to Seiu asking his mother where his father and Kun are. Over time, Lee and Ji-woo also get married. Most importantly, Do-hook and Yu-eun complete their family with both of their children, living happily in the days to come. Thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed, please give it a like, and subscribe if you want to see more manhwa recaps. Let me know what stories you'd like to see next. And one last big thank you to everyone that left some really nice words of encouragement and really kept me motivated to keep posting these stories for everyone to enjoy. Until next time, bye-bye.